Living Head. In X-Men Origins Wolverine, we follow Logan as he goes through brutal experiments until he becomes the perfect weapon. Along the way, he crosses paths with Wade Wilson, a talkative, sarcastic mercenary full of attitude. But near the end, that Wade is transformed into the so-called Weapon 11, a completely different version of the character. In the final battle, Wolverine fights this version and defeats him by cutting off his head. It seems like the end, but in the post-credits scene, the camera returns to the wreckage of the fight. In the silence, something moves. Deadpool's arm starts crawling through the rubble and finds his own head. Then suddenly his eyes open and his mouth makes that signature shh gesture. It's weird and clearly meant to suggest he's still alive. The problem is nobody wanted to see that version continue. Even Ryan Reynolds himself has expressed discomfort with that version for years, and the result was simple. This scene led nowhere. Fox completely abandoned the idea and years later rebooted the character from scratch. Ghost Team. In The Incredible Hulk, there's a scene a lot of people remember as the beginning of something huge, but in practice, it didn't exactly go where it seemed to be heading. Unlike the current standard, it doesn't even appear after the credits. It comes before the ending to make sure everyone saw it. The setting is simple: an empty, half-destroyed bar, perfectly reflecting the mood after the chaos in Harlem, where Hulk and Abomination fought. Sitting there is General Ross, clearly frustrated with everything that went wrong. Out of nowhere, Tony Stark walks in. He approaches Ross and immediately starts talking in that provocative way of his. Stark comments on the Super Soldier programs, basically saying all of this went wrong for a reason. Ross, already at his limit, clearly doesn't like the approach. Then comes the line that seemed to change everything.
What if I told you we were putting a team together?
Hard cut, scene over. At the time, it sounded like the direct beginning of the Avengers, but later Marvel adjusted that idea, and this scene complicated everything. Years later, a short film called The Consultant was released, basically reinterpreting the scene. The official explanation is that Stark wasn't recruiting anyone. He had actually been sent there specifically to annoy Ross and prevent Abomination from being released for any larger initiative. In the end, the scene wasn't abandoned, but its meaning changed. And with the Hulk actor being recast and other behind-the-scenes decisions, that tease ultimately didn't matter much. The big showdown. At the end of Black Adam, Amanda Waller contacts him through a drone, making it clear she's watching his every move. She basically gives him a direct warning: if he leaves his territory, someone will be sent to deal with him. Black Adam, more confident than ever, responds that there is no one on Earth capable of defeating him, but we know there is. Seconds later, smoke starts filling the area, and then he appears: Superman. Henry Cavill returns wearing the brighter classic suit with the iconic theme directly reminiscent of the older films. He faces Black Adam calmly and delivers a simple line:
Black Adam.
Black Adam responds with a smile, as if he's finally found someone worthy, and that was it. There was no continuation. Cavill's return was far more of a personal push from Dwayne Johnson than part of any structured studio plan. Shortly after, DC underwent a full reboot with the arrival of James Gunn and Peter Safran, who decided to restart the universe with a different actor in the role. In the end, the scene became nothing more than a teaser for a showdown that never happened. Alien Droplet. In Spider-Man No Way Home, in the first post-credits scene, we find Eddie Brock sitting in a bar, completely confused, with him as Venom, the symbiote creature sharing his body. The two were pulled into that universe because of the same spell from No Way Home, but they clearly have no idea where they are. While drinking and trying to understand the situation, a bartender starts explaining the basics of the MCU. Eddie just stares, trying to process all the information like he's hearing the craziest story imaginable. Venom, meanwhile, seems much more interested, especially when he hears about powerful heroes. The conversation keeps building until Eddie makes a decision. He decides he needs to find this so-called Spider-Man. It feels like the beginning of a crossover many people wanted to see, but it doesn't even get started. Doctor Strange's final spell kicks in, reversing everything and sending everyone back to their original universe. Eddie simply vanishes in the middle of the bar, but not everything leaves. A small fragment of the symbiote stays behind. That living piece opens the door for the character's future inside the MCU without bringing Eddie along. But so far, nothing has happened, and the next Spider-Man movie doesn't seem to have anything to do with Venom.
Was to make everyone forget about me.
Forced meeting. Morbius tries to set up something huge, but it goes nowhere. It all starts as a direct side effect of the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. The sky opens with those multiversal cracks, and out of nowhere, Adrian Toomes, the Vulture played by Michael Keaton, suddenly appears in this other universe, the same one as Venom and Morbius. He shows up inside a prison cell with no clear explanation, and since nobody knows who he is in that world, he ends up being released. In the second scene, things get even stranger. Toomes is now free, and somehow, he reappears wearing the full Vulture suit, that advanced alien tech gear which theoretically shouldn't even exist in this universe. He arranges a meeting with Michael Morbius in a remote area outside the city. Morbius shows up, they stare at each other, and Toomes gets straight to the point. He says he doesn't know exactly why he ended up there, but he thinks it has something to do with Spider-Man. Then he proposes a team. According to him, together they could do some good. Morbius responds with a simple, intriguing.
Team up.
Could do some good.
Intriguing.
And that was exactly how Sony's biggest villain tease died before it even started. The idea of the Sinister Six is just left hanging there. Yeah, Sony refuses to quit. The film had a very weak reception from both critics and audiences, which made Sony pump the brakes on any immediate continuation. The motivation doesn't help either, since Morbius has no connection to Spider-Man in that universe. In the end, it felt more like a mandatory tease than something genuinely planned. A new villain. In Justice League, after the credits, there's one of those moments clearly designed to hype people up, but it ended up being nothing more than a promise. It begins with Lex Luthor, now free, escaping from a luxury yacht in the middle of nowhere. Suddenly, a smaller boat approaches, and out steps Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. The two meet and start talking. In the theatrical version, Lex basically suggests that if the heroes have a team, maybe it's time the villains had one too. It's a direct tease, almost an invitation to form a dark version of the Justice League. The idea of what could have been an Injustice League or something similar is made very clear. In the director's cut, Zack Snyder's Justice League, the conversation changes. Instead of talking about a team, Lex reveals crucial information. Batman is Bruce Wayne.
His name is Bruce Wayne.
And that completely shifts the focus. That difference isn't random. Each version was setting up a different path. The theatrical cut suggested a villain team, while Snyder's version was clearly pointing toward a direct conflict between Deathstroke and Batman, possibly in the solo Batman film that ended up being canceled. And as we know, none of it happened. No villain team, no epic showdown. With internal changes at DC and multiple projects being canceled, everything was abandoned. Night Visit. Speaking again of Zack Snyder's Justice League, there's a post-credits scene that works as one final direct tease for the future the director wanted to build. The scene takes place at night at Bruce Wayne's house. Everything is quiet until a presence suddenly appears. Bruce realizes he's not alone. That's when John Johns appears, Martian Manhunter finally officially revealed. He introduces himself and confirms something few expected within the story. He had been on Earth for a long time in disguise. During the conversation, he explains that Darkseid hasn't given up and that the anti-life equation is on Earth, which basically means a much bigger war is still coming. John then offers his help and says he's willing to fight alongside the League when the time comes. It's an entrance clearly meant to expand the universe even further and raise the threat level. Originally, this scene wasn't supposed to feature Martian Manhunter. Zack Snyder wanted to use Green Lantern John Stewart, but the studio didn't allow it because they had other plans for the character. So John was included as the alternative, but that future never happened. The film was already released as the conclusion of Snyder's vision, with no real plans for a continuation. With DC changing direction and abandoning that universe, all of this setup led nowhere. Silent betrayal. In The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the post-credits scene ends the story with a detail that completely changes how we see a character who had seemed to be on the right side the whole time. Throughout the series, we follow Sam Wilson taking on the mantle of Captain America while dealing with more grounded threats. In the middle of it all is Sharon Carter, former ally of Steve Rogers, who spent years hiding in Madripoor after being labeled a fugitive by the government. In the final episode, Sharon helps in the mission against the Flag Smashers, and as a reward, receives an official pardon. She's reinstated into the US government and regains access to high-level resources and technology. Up to that point, it looks like a classic redemption ending. But the post-credits scene changes everything. Right after being officially welcomed back, Sharon makes a mysterious phone call. Her tone completely changes. She tells someone to prepare the sale of government secrets, including weapons prototypes and advanced technology. In other words, she didn't come back to help, she came back with more power. The reveal ties directly into the fact that she was actually the power broker.
Alors maintenant, power broker.
An influential underworld figure operating in Madripoor. That twist divided audiences quite a bit because it turns a classic character into someone much more morally ambiguous, almost villainous. The scene makes it clear that she is now in a perfect position to operate behind the scenes with direct access to sensitive information. And even so, nothing happened afterward. Since 2021, the character simply hasn't appeared again in MCU projects. The tease remains there, suggesting a new internal threat, but so far completely unresolved. Secret Room. In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Sony clearly wanted to build something big, and the film's ending makes that obvious with zero subtlety. We follow Gustav Fiers, a mysterious man known as the Gentleman, who had been set up since the first film as someone pulling strings behind the scenes. After visiting Harry Osborn in prison, who had already become the Green Goblin, he heads to a hidden Oscorp bunker. He walks through a corridor filled with equipment and prototypes of classic Spider-Man villains. There are Vulture's wings, Dr. Octopus's mechanical arms, still in early development, Rhino's armor. Everything is laid out to to build the Sinister Six. It's the kind of scene clearly made to hype up comic fans. The problem? None of it ever happened. The movie made around $700 million, which sounds huge, but it wasn't enough considering the massive budget and heavy marketing, and critics tore it apart, mainly because the movie tries to cram in so much at once that it barely develops any of it properly. That scene basically became a teaser for an entire universe that never existed. In the end, everything was shelved, the franchise was canceled, and Spider-Man was rebooted into the MCU with Tom Holland. Ring of Fear. In Green Lantern, the post-credits scene tries to save the movie's impact by setting up a classic comic book twist. Throughout the story, we follow Hal Jordan learning to use the Green Ring while facing Parallax, an entity tied to fear that corrupts entire planets. Alongside him is Sinestro, one of the Corps' most experienced Lanterns, respected, disciplined, and completely devoted to order. He basically serves as a mentor. After Parallax is defeated, everything seems resolved. The threat is contained and the Corps moves on, but the post-credits scene shows not everyone came away unchanged. Sinestro appears alone, clearly troubled by the recent events. He stares at the yellow ring, which represents the power of fear, something previously considered forbidden. Without much hesitation, he puts it on. The transformation is immediate. His suit changes color, turning yellow, and his eyes gain a different glow. It's the confirmation that he crossed the line. In the comics, this turn is one of Green Lantern's most important conflicts, positioning Sinestro as Hal Jordan's direct opposite. The problem is, it was never developed. The film received a very negative reception from both critics and audiences, causing Warner Brothers to abandon any sequel plans. Cosmic Arrival. In Eternals, after the main events, where part of the Eternals stay on Earth and others head into space, we follow Thena, Druig, and Makari traveling aboard the Domo. Their goal is to find other Eternals scattered throughout the universe and better understand what's happening after the Celestials' interference. But suddenly, something interrupts the ship. A presence appears without warning. Then Pip the Troll teleports into the Domo. He arrives completely chaotic, half-drunk, loud, and with zero filter. He immediately breaks the serious tone of the scene and gives an over-the-top introduction. According to him, standing there is none other than Eros, the Prince of Titan, brother of Thanos, and a man known for manipulating emotions. Moments later, Eros appears. Played by Harry Styles, he arrives with a calm and confident presence. He says he knows exactly where Cersei, Kingo, and Phastos are, the ones taken by the Celestial Erisham at the end of the film. Eros claims he can help rescue them all, creating a direct setup for a possible sequel. Another important detail, he holds a device similar to Ajax, suggesting he also has advanced knowledge about the Celestials. This became one of the movie's most talked about scenes because of Harry Styles' casting, but that storyline simply stopped there. Nothing has continued it since. The film received a lukewarm response, and Marvel shifted focus toward the multiverse saga instead. The result is a team in space, ready to act, but with no clear destination so far. Genius Caterpillar. Shazam delivers one of the most unexpected teases in the old DC universe, and also one of the most forgotten. After being defeated by Billy Batson, Dr. Thaddeus Sivana ends up imprisoned, completely obsessed with the magic he lost. The scene shows him inside his cell, desperately scribbling magical symbols all over the walls, trying to recreate the portal to the Rock of Eternity. He's already halfway detached from reality, repeating the process over and over without success, like it's the only thing that still matters to him. Then suddenly, a voice interrupts him. And it's not from a guard or another inmate, it comes from the window. When the camera reveals it, it's Mr. Mind, a small alien caterpillar but incredibly intelligent and telepathic. Yes, it looks strange, but in the comics, he's one of Shazam's classic villains. He starts speaking to Sivana calmly, almost manipulatively, saying there are other ways to access magic, and that this path isn't the only one. Little by little, he plants the idea of something bigger, mentioning that the 7 realms can be conquered. It's basically an invitation to form the Monster Society of Evil. The scene clearly tries to set up a future threat, something more strategic and less direct than just another fistfight. That group in the comics includes several different villains, so it could have led to something very different on screen, but none of it moved forward. In the sequel, Shazam! Fury of the Gods, the focus shifted completely to mythological threats, leaving that plot behind. Even worse, the sequel itself jokes about it, showing that the plan is still in progress, as if even they didn't know what to do with it. After DC's reboot, the idea simply died there.